In the vast plains of ancient India, nestled between the foothills of the Himalayas, lay a small village where people lived simple, humble lives. The village had little in the way of wealth, but its people had hearts full of hope. Among them was a young man named Ananda, who carried an unquenchable thirst for truth. He had heard tales of the great Buddha, the enlightened one, whose wisdom had changed the lives of thousands. Since his childhood, Ananda had felt an emptiness inside him. He had wealth, good health, and a loving family. Yet something profound seemed to be missing. The usual pleasures of life didn't satisfy him, and he often found himself lost in thought, gazing at the horizon, wondering what lay beyond the material world. His friends often laughed at him, saying, "You think too much, Ananda. Life is simple. Just live it." But Ananda couldn't shake the feeling that there was something greater to be discovered. Something that went beyond the fleeting joys of the senses. When he heard that the Buddha was to visit a nearby town, he felt a call deep within him to seek the wisdom of the enlightened one. The beginning of the search. One morning, before the sun had fully risen, Ananda packed his belongings and set off on a journey to find the Buddha. The path was long and arduous, winding through forests and mountains, but Ananda's heart was light with anticipation. As he traveled, he encountered many people who had been touched by the Buddha's teachings, monks, lay people, and scholars, each with a unique story of how their lives had changed after meeting him. At last, after many days of travel, Ananda arrived at a gathering where the Buddha was teaching under a large banyan tree. The atmosphere was peaceful, and the air was filled with the soft sound of chanting. Ananda's heart swelled with awe as he saw the Buddha for the first time. His presence was serene, and his face radiated an indescribable calm. Ananda approached the Buddha, bowed deeply, and said, "Great teacher, I have come from afar, seeking the truth. I wish to understand how I can attain enlightenment and be free from the suffering that clings to my heart." The Buddha smiled gently and motioned for Ananda to sit. The Four Noble Truths. "Ananda," the Buddha began, "the path to enlightenment is not easy, but it is simple. The first step is to understand the nature of suffering." Buddha then explained the Four Noble Truths. 1. The truth of suffering, dukkha. All beings experience suffering. Birth, old age, sickness, and death are inevitable, and so too is the dissatisfaction that arises from clinging to temporary pleasures. 2. The truth of the cause of suffering. Suffering arises from craving and attachment, our desire for things to be other than they are. When we cling to fleeting joys or push away unpleasant experiences, we create suffering for ourselves. 3. The truth of the end of suffering. It is possible to end suffering by letting go of attachment and desire. By freeing ourselves from craving, we can achieve nirvana, a state of complete liberation and peace. 4. The truth of the path to the end of suffering. The way to end suffering is by following the Noble Eightfold Path, a guide to ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. The Noble Eightfold Path. Ananda listened intently as the Buddha described the Eightfold Path, which would lead him to enlightenment. 1. Right view. Understanding the nature of reality and seeing things as they truly are, including the impermanence of life. 2. Right intention. Cultivating positive thoughts and intentions rooted in compassion, love, and non-harm. 3. Right speech. Speaking truthfully, kindly, and without harm to others. 4. Right action. Engaging in ethical conduct by refraining from harmful actions like killing, stealing, and lying. 5. Right livelihood. Earning a living in a way that does not cause harm to others or oneself. 6. Right effort. Putting effort into cultivating wholesome states of mind, such as kindness and mindfulness, and abandoning negative states of mind, such as hatred or greed. 7. Right mindfulness. Developing awareness of the present moment, being mindful of thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations. 8. Right concentration. Training the mind through meditation to focus on a single object and develop deep states of peace and clarity. Ananda's determination. As the Buddha finished explaining the path, Ananda felt a new sense of clarity and purpose. But he also felt overwhelmed by the enormity of the task ahead. "Great teacher," he said, "this path seems so vast and difficult. How can I possibly walk it without falling into despair or distraction?" The Buddha nodded, understanding Ananda's concerns. The path to enlightenment is like a journey up a great mountain, Ananda. At times, the way will seem steep, and you may stumble. But take heart, for every step you take is a step closer to the summit. Do not focus on the distance, focus on each step. He continued, begin with small steps. Practice mindfulness in your daily life. Pay attention to your thoughts and actions, and gradually you will find that your mind becomes clearer, your heart lighter. Do not seek perfection, seek progress. Over time, you will see the transformation within yourself. The practice of mindfulness, inspired by the Buddha's words, Ananda returned to his village and began to incorporate mindfulness into his everyday life. He practiced the Buddha's teachings diligently, starting with right mindfulness. Each morning, he would sit in meditation, focusing on his breath, and throughout the day, he would observe his thoughts and emotions without getting caught up in them. When anger arose, Ananda would acknowledge it and let it pass, rather than reacting impulsively. When joy arose, he would savor it without clinging to it. Over time, Ananda began to notice subtle changes in his mind. He became less reactive, more patient, and more compassionate toward others. The challenge of desire. Yet, despite his progress, Ananda still struggled with desire. He found it difficult to let go of the pleasures of life, good food, comfortable living, and the company of friends. He often felt torn between his spiritual practice and the allure of worldly pleasures. One day, feeling frustrated with his lack of progress, Ananda returned to the Buddha and confessed his struggles. Great teacher, I am trying my best to follow the path, but desire keeps pulling me away. How can I let go of these cravings? The Buddha smiled and told him a parable. Ananda, imagine a man who is thirsty. He comes across a salty river, but no matter how much he drinks, his thirst is never quenched. The more he drinks, the thirstier he becomes. The man doesn't realize that his true need is not for salty water, but for fresh water. In the same way, worldly pleasures are like salty water. They seem to promise happiness, but they never truly satisfy. The Buddha continued, the key is to understand that desire itself is impermanent, just like everything else in life. When you see desire arise, do not judge yourself harshly. Simply observe it, and it will pass. In time, your attachment to these fleeting pleasures will diminish. The moment of enlightenment. Years passed, and Ananda continued his practice with dedication. He followed the Noble Eightfold Path, gradually letting go of his attachments and desires. One day, while sitting in deep meditation under a tree, Ananda experienced a profound shift in his consciousness. His mind became completely still, free from all distractions, and he felt a deep sense of unity with the world around him. In that moment, Ananda realized the truth that the Buddha had spoken of so long ago, the truth that everything is interconnected, that suffering arises from attachment and that liberation comes from letting go. He felt a profound sense of peace, a joy that was not dependent on anything external. Ananda had finally understood what it meant to be enlightened. He saw the world with new eyes, no longer grasping for temporary pleasures, but resting in the contentment of the present moment, the end of suffering. Returning to the Buddha, Ananda bowed deeply and said, Great teacher, I have finally tasted the freedom you spoke of. The suffering that once burdened my heart is no more. The Buddha looked at Ananda with compassion and said, You have done well, Ananda. Remember, enlightenment is not an end but a beginning. Continue to walk the path with humility and compassion, helping others as you go. Ananda nodded, understanding that his journey was not just for himself, but for the benefit of all beings. And so, with a heart full of gratitude, he dedicated his life to spreading the Buddha's teachings, guiding others on the path to enlightenment, and showing them that the way out of suffering was always within reach. The journey to enlightenment, Ananda realized, was not about escaping the world, but about seeing the world with clear eyes and an open heart. And with this understanding, he lived his life in peace, content with each moment, knowing that the true treasure was not in the things he could possess, but in the freedom he had found within himself.